Hey, I'm Nico, and here are 30 useless facts about the Nintendo GameCube. Before being called the GameCube, the codename was something completely different. The console was actually internally referred to as the Dolphin. Weird. And even weirder is the fact that the CPU used in the GameCube was codenamed Flipper. You know, Flipper the Dolphin. They really had all of this figured out, didn't they? During Nintendo Space World 2000, there were a bunch of trailers created to show off the power of the GameCube. One of these tech demos was called Meow's Party and featured the Pokemon Meows playing the guitar and singing, as well as a bunch of dancing Squirtles and other Pokemons. Another tech demo actually showed a battle between Link and Ganondorf and got everybody excited for what the sequel to Majora's Mask would look like. As we all know, the game ended up looking like this, which surprised quite a bunch of people at first, but I do have to admit that Wind Waker is one of my favorite games ever. Another tech demo showed a new version of Peach's Castle, which developers could explore by controlling a red arrow. There were a bunch of places to explore in the castle, and all of those rooms showcased different graphical effects the GameCube could pull off, such as anti-aliasing, projection textures, local lighting, maximum polygons, and much more. This tech demo was actually leaked online, and you can now experience it for yourself, which is actually pretty cool. Piracy was one heck of a problem in the gaming industry at the time the GameCube was being created. Piracy is actually what killed the Sega Dreamcast, so Nintendo actually needed to do something to protect the GameCube from suffering the same fate. Their solution was to use smaller discs that couldn't actually be copied using a simple CD burner. Neat idea. But it also came with a couple downsides. Those smaller discs couldn't contain as much data as the other consoles. This caused a couple of problems for third-party developers who were porting their games to the console. This is why some games actually have 2 discs in the box and are forcing you to swap them during gameplay. It was all about the size. While every single controller we play with nowadays doesn't have any wires, this wasn't the case prior to the GameCube. Nintendo was actually the first company to introduce wireless controllers for a gaming console. This controller was known as the Wavebird, and I did remember being super impressed by the fact that I could finally sit far away from the TV without having any wires in the way. Man, technology is crazy. The GameCube intro music is a classic and everybody has heard it before. But here's the thing, if you hold down the Z button, you'll get to hear another intro music. And if you plug in 4 controllers and hold down Z on all of those, there will be a third version of the intro. So useless, yet so fun. Microsoft's Xbox was the king of online play with their Xbox Live service. PS2 also had online support, although it wasn't as good, but the GameCube was by far the worst performing console on that front. The only games that supported online play were the Phantasy Star Online games. Sad. And Phantasy Star Online being an MMO, well, being able to communicate with other players was actually pretty important. This is why this controller was actually created. Yup, it's a GameCube with a big keyboard. This thing just cannot be comfy to hold, I don't believe it. If you bought a Nintendo broadband adapter, which was required for online play, but had no interest in playing Phantasy Star Online, well, you could still use it to play other games via LAN multiplayer. Mario Kart Double Dash was one of the games that supported this feature, and having experienced it myself a couple years ago, let me tell you that it was actually pretty cool to link a bunch of GameCubes together. The GameCube settings menu features some smooth and relaxing music playing in the background. It's actually so peaceful that I could probably sleep with this music playing. The thing is, if you speed it up quite a lot, it will actually sound like this. And this tune is actually the intro theme that was used by the Famicom Disk System in Japan. Whoa, that's insane, isn't it? During the GameCube years, Nintendo actually developed a prototype motion controller that game developer Factor 5 wanted to use in their games. It was eventually never released and motion controls only became a thing with the Wii, but man, I just can't imagine what would have happened if the GameCube actually introduced a game like GameCube Sports. Would it have been the success that Wii Sport was? Would everything be different today? I have no idea. Nintendo actually ran a contest called What Would You Do for a Nintendo GameCube? This contest picked a couple fans to perform stunts in front of a crowd, and the winner would get a GameCube, a GBA, a bunch of games, and a lot of cash. Some of these stunts included a guy dressed up as Mario proposing to his girlfriend dressed up as Princess Peach, or a boy that painted a GameCube and Nintendo logo using ketchup and other condiments using only his tongue. Ugh. There were also a girl that ate a GameCube-sized replica of uncooked Spam, cat food, and chocolate syrup. Now this is just getting gross at this point. The winner was actually a guy that shaved his head and painted his whole body blue to become a human pigman. Oh, and he also ate live worms and crickets while at it. Alright, I'm gonna be sick. Next useless fact, please. The design for the Nintendo GameCube controller might have been inspired by a prototype controller for the Virtual Boy. As you can see, they have very similar shapes, and all of the buttons have the same colors that were used in the final design of the GameCube controller. There were a bunch of rareware games planned for the GameCube, such as Cameo, Elements of Power, Perfect Dark Zero, and Grabbed by the Ghoulies. But due to the fact that Rare was actually acquired by Microsoft, well, these games were eventually just released on Microsoft's consoles. Bummer. Prior to the launch of the Nintendo GameCube, every single Nintendo console launched with a copy of a Super Mario game. Well, this time around, Nintendo launched it with Luigi's Mansion, an adventure featuring Mario's brother. Using a specific cable, you could link your Game Boy Advance to the GameCube and use it to play some games in new ways using the GBA screen. I remember playing Zelda's Four Swords and Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles using these cables, and I do have to admit that it was actually quite impressive. The problem is actually finding 3 other friends who own both a Game Boy and a link cable. To save your games, you need memory cards, and at one point there was a plan for a memory card that could be expanded using SD cards. Sadly, this SD card adapter was actually never released. The GameCube was a great system, but it didn't sell that well, and one of the reasons for this was the lack of a DVD player. It may sound stupid today with Netflix and everything, but back then, the fact that Sony's PlayStation 2 had a DVD player made it 10 times more interesting for consumers. Which is probably why Nintendo partnered with Panasonic and created another version of the GameCube which actually included a DVD player. The Panasonic Q wasn't sold outside of Japan, but look at this thing! It comes from the future! Whoa! So the GameCube isn't actually a cube, as the width, length, and height are all different sizes. I guess calling it the game Rectangle wouldn't have sold as many units though. Speaking of, there was a parody of the Nintendo GameCube referenced in the series Drake and Josh, called the Game Sphere. The Game Sphere is actually just a memory boomball stereo CD player. Anyways, because the GameCube was selling so poorly, Nintendo had to get creative in order to get third-party developers aboard. One of the ways Nintendo tried to lure people into developing for them was to give them the license to use Mario and a couple other characters in their games. This is why Mario, Luigi, and Peach are in the games SSX On Tour and NBA Street Volume 3. Despite those exclusive characters, this didn't actually save the poor GameCube. The last title released for the GameCube was actually Madden NFL 08, which was also released on the Nintendo Wii and DS, despite game developments from Nintendo ending 6 months prior to its release. The GameCube is actually powerful enough to render stereoscopic 3D, At one point, Nintendo planned an add-on that would connect to a TV and enable 3D in GameCube games. One of the first games that was planned for the 3D extension was Luigi's Mansion. The thing is, this 3D peripheral would have cost more than the GameCube itself, which is why it was eventually cancelled. The best-selling game for the Nintendo GameCube is actually Super Smash Bros. Melee, which sold 7.4 million units. When the GameCube was first released, Nintendo wanted to sell about 50 million units by the year 2005, and they ended up selling 21.7 millions. Wow, they completely missed their target. Poor GameCube. It was actually Nintendo's 10th best-selling system. The only system that performed even worse was, you guessed it, the Wii U. Thanks a lot for watching. If you want more useless fun facts, tap the cards on screen right now. And as for me, I'll try to stop being sick and have better voice for the next video. Alright, see ya gamers.